On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the Budget Analyst Office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of the incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
This is Truth in Media. I'm Ben Swan, and today on the show we're taking a look at two new bombshell developments on the attacks of 9/11. The first, that for the very first time, the fire commissioners of the New York Fire District have voted unanimously to call for a new investigation into 9/11. It's based on evidence, they say, of explosives bringing down those buildings. Listen.
The overwhelming evidence presented in said petition demonstrates beyond any doubt that pre-planted explosives and/or incendiaries, not just airplanes and the ensuing fires, caused the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center buildings.
And the second bombshell, a new $300,000 study has been published by the University of Alaska, and it proves that World Trade Center 7, the third building to come down on 9/11, did not come down the way that federal agencies have claimed for years. We're going to show you exactly what that study has found. All of it today on Truth in Media. Now, back to the two big developments I've been telling you about that, of course, mainstream media is completely ignoring, pretending as if none of these things have happened. The first, as I mentioned, is this pretty remarkable resolution calling for a new investigation into 9/11. It was made just a few weeks ago by the Franklin Square and Munson Fire District. The Board of Fire Commissioners just weeks ago unanimously passed a resolution claiming, quote, overwhelming evidence of pre-planted explosives and/or incendiaries, which they say caused the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center buildings. Here's a clip from that meeting on August 1st of this year.
Whereas the victims of 9/11, their families, the people of New York City, and our nation deserve that every crime related to the attacks of September 11, 2001 be investigated to the fullest, and that every person who was responsible face justice. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Fire Commissioners of the Franklin Square and Munson Fire District fully supports a comprehensive federal grand jury investigation and prosecution of every crime related to the attacks of September 11th, 2001, as well as any and all efforts by other government entities to investigate and uncover the full truth surrounding the events of that horrible day.
So you heard there the call for the new investigation, but what does it actually mean? Well, the Franklin Square and Munson Fire Department, which oversees a volunteer fire department serving a hamlet of about 30,000 residents just outside of Queens, New York, became the first legislative body in the country, the very first, to officially support a new investigation into the events of 9/11. Now, all of this is happening on the backdrop of a brand new study published by the University of Alaska by Dr. Leroy Hulsey. Hulsey has a very accomplished background and has determined that there is only one way for World Trade Center 7, Building 7, to have come down. Just one way. Let's break it down for you right now in this reality check. It has been 18 years since the terror attacks of 9/11. On that day, 2 towers fell in New York City, right? Well, actually, that's wrong. 3 towers fell. The North and South Towers of the World Trade Center, also known as the Twin Towers, and a third building, World Trade Center Building 7.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires fueled by office furnishings. It did not collapse from explosives or from fuel oil fires.
We really have a new kind of progressive collapse that we have discovered here, which is a fire-induced progressive collapse.
So to be clear, despite there being small and isolated fires on just a few floors, the 47-story Building 7 came down symmetrically into its own footprint in just under 7 seconds at 5:20 p.m. on 9/11. The official investigation into the collapse was conducted by NIST. It's an agency under the U.S. Department of Commerce, which concluded that, again, normal office fires were responsible for the failure of the structure, saying that falling debris from World Trade Center's North Tower flew and crashed into Building 7 and then ignited small office and furniture fires throughout several floors of the building. And that those fires burned for so long and so hot they caused thermal expansion and pushed beams off their girders, which led to the collapse of the building. But now this extensive study by the University of Alaska Fairbanks has proven that the NIST conclusion is actually wrong.
And in a controlled demolition, when you have a core and an exterior, when you take the core out, it pulls in the exterior and it comes down.
What happens if you leave half of them? So if it's not a controlled demolition, if you just have a failure of half the columns,
you'd have a partial collapse.
Again, that was 6 years ago, and yet now on the 18th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, a new study has just been published, one that took hundreds of thousands of dollars and several years to complete. The groundbreaking Building 7 study, a structural reevaluation of the collapse of World Trade Center 7, was conducted by Dr. Leroy Hulsey, a PhD, as well as 2 other researchers at the University of Alaska. It is a finite element analysis that uses computer modeling based on the original blueprints for World Trade Center 7 to determine what could and what could not have caused the collapse. The study examines NIST conclusions and finds them to be untenable.